There's a captive finally released, finally free. I am saved and liberated, every shackle falling to the ground, no longer bound. I'm running to the light of day, hear the sound of the soul escaping. Free, you captured me, I'm released from the lies that I have believed. Your truth has set me free. Free is the love you poured out on me. I was blind, but now I can see. Your truth has set me free. There's a prison, cold and barren. There's a champion rising up to save, conquering the grave. From the darkness, light is bursting. It is finished, death has lost its sting. Lord, I am free. Hear the sound of a soul escaping. Free, you captured me, I'm released from the lies that I have believed. Your truth has set me free. Free is the love you poured out on me. I was blind, but now I can see. Your truth has set me free. I'm running to the light of day, hear the sound of the soul escaping. Free, you captured me, I'm released from the lies that I have believed. Your truth has set me free. Poured out on me. I was blind, but now I can see. Your truth has set me free. Oh, 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 oh.
A thousand times I failed, still your mercy remains. And should I stumble again, still I'm caught in your grace everlasting. Your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame. Above all else, my purpose remains. The art of losing myself in bringing you grace everlasting. Your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame. In my heart and my soul, Lord, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and praise become my embrace, to love you from the inside out. Remains the art of losing myself in bringing you praise everlasting. Your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame. In my heart and my soul, but I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and grace become my embrace, to love you from the inside out. And everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame, and the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out, Lord. My soul cries out, Lord. My heart and my soul, but I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and praise become my embrace, to love you from the inside out. And everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame, and the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out, Lord. My soul cries out, and everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame, and the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out, Lord. My soul cries out from the inside out, Lord. My soul cries out, Lord.
Well, good morning all. It's good to see you. And I figured for fun, at the beginning in the summer here, we'd pick up in the book of Mark, kind of where we left off in the end of our series entitled The Power of Routine. You know, we ended there in Mark talking about one of our central scriptures to our 8 to 15, or the concept of the 8 to 15, which, by the way, are the people that God supernaturally and strategically has put into our lives that He's trying to reach, and He's asking us to join with Him to help move them closer to a meaningful, powerful, deeper, growing relationship with Him. So that was in the book of Mark, chapter 5, verses like 18 through 20, 17 through 20. And we pick up right behind where we left off. So for the next few weeks, we're going to be in the book of Mark. And today, this is again Mark chapter 5, beginning verse 21. We find that you'll remember Jesus heals a guy the verses we just talked about. He heals a guy and he wants to come with him, but Jesus tells him no. He sends him back to his 8 to 15, back to his household, but they chase Jesus off. The community leaders chase Jesus off because he's done this radical healing, and they want him out of town because they don't know what to do with him. So Jesus gets back into the boat, and again, as we said last time, Mark has this way of talking about alerting us to transitions. Jesus gets in the boat and again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake. A large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Now, Mark conveniently leaves out some details. You can find the details of when Jesus crosses back over the lake. You can find them in Matthew, the first of the New Testament books, Matthew chapter 9. And to paraphrase for you, if you'll let me give you a little bit of context about this, why this large crowd is waiting on Jesus. So from Matthew, Jesus goes back to Capernaum, or Capernaum, if that's how you say it. And he's walking back into his city. He's looking around. He's greeted by some people bringing a friend who is paralyzed to him. And undoubtedly, they asked Jesus to help their friend. Jesus does what, really, I don't know if they were after or not. Jesus says, your sins are forgiven. Well, when Jesus forgives sins, it hacks off religious people, and they happen to be around because, again, Jesus is just walking home, right? Or back to his temporary home there in the community. And they start some dialogue with Jesus, and Jesus double downs on them. Jesus double downs and says, oh, well, it's not good enough that I forgave his sins, huh? How about I forgive his sins and tell him to get up off that bed and walk? And so Jesus commands him to be healed, and not only is he just healed spiritually, he's healed physically, and the guy gets up and he's doing back tucks and flips and cartwheels. Not really, but I would be, and I'm sure you would be too. And he takes off and he goes home. Hope he goes to see his mom, his wife, and kids. I hope he's bringing that mat rolled up under his arm, and I hope he throws it down in the floor and he says, I don't need that thing anymore because the Lord has had mercy on me. At least I hope that's how the story is. Well, as he goes off, Jesus continues on his way, and he runs into this guy who writes the first book of the New Testament, Matthew. Because when you're going into town, there's always a tax booth. He had to collect Roman taxes, and so Jesus would have had to pay his tax to go on the road. And he does the unthinkable. I'm sure he drops his tax money in, but he looks at the tax collector and he goes, hey, you, I've seen you before. How about you come follow me? And Matthew, as he's writing his gospel, says he just gets up and goes. And he goes, takes Jesus with him and has this big party at his house. And this is all in the same day, all packed in to explain how there's this large crowd that we're going to get to here in a minute. And so they have this big party. Matthew has his friends over, sinners like him, as the country song goes. They're all sitting around the table. They're chopping it up. They're laughing it up. I hope they're asking Jesus great questions. I don't know if they're like doing the magic questions. You know, one of the sinners or tax collectors holds up 3 fingers behind his back and looks at Jesus and goes, how many fingers am I holding up? You know, I don't know if they treat Jesus like he's part magician or if he's part like miracle guy. Hey, can you make this bread float, or whatever they're doing? But they're having great community building time around the table at Matthew's house. Well, some more religious people show up in this large crowd outside of his house, and they start giving Jesus' disciples some lip. They start asking Jesus' disciples pretty much this. It's like, why does your teacher go in there and eat with those people, right? Quote, those people. Anytime those quotes show up, it's scary. Why is he in there eating with those people? And the disciples respond like only the disciples can respond, because he do what he do. Or maybe that's in the ancient. But anyway, you get what I'm doing. They say, I don't know why he's in there, but that's where he is. And so Jesus overhears the conversation, and all these people are gathered outside of where he's having a meal with people that really he shouldn't be around after he's just healed a guy. So this crowd keeps growing and growing and growing. And Jesus yells out from the table, he says, hey, you tell them out there that it's not the healthy that need a physician, but the sick people who need a physician. And I can only imagine, and we've talked about this before, I can only imagine everybody looked down out at the snooty people outside asking the question and started high-fiving. Yeah, you tell them, Jesus. You tell them it's the sick people who need you, not the... And then, of course, they realized that, wait a minute. "Yo, man, are you calling me sick? Like, what's wrong with you?" And Matthew, he's being a good host, but he's trying to keep the emotional bomb that's about to go off under wraps. He's like, "Yo, man, why are you talking about my people like that? What's going on?" And Jesus tells him, that he has come not for people who got it all together, but people who don't have it together. And that's why he's with those particular people. So then he leaves the table. Again, we're trying to give you some context of how this large crowd gets over when Jesus shows up where we're going to be in Mark chapter 5 here in a minute. And Jesus gets up and he goes outside. Well, some of his friends for his cousin, John the Baptist, show up and ask Jesus some more questions. And then this large mob of people, and so they're everywhere, right? There's disciples of John, there's disciples of Jesus, there's these people who are awed by Jesus' healing, there's these tax collectors and sinners all of a sudden who show up just interested in why Jesus wants to hang out with them, and Jesus is trying to have compassion on everybody, and this gigantic crowd grows and grows and grows and grows and grows, and in a minute, all of a sudden, and this is where we get in, then, right, consecutive, in the midst of this gigantic crowd, then one of the synagogue leaders, and you, if you're unfamiliar with the synagogue language, translate that as a church leader. So then one of the local church leaders by the name of Jairus shows up, came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at Jesus' feet. Now you got to imagine, he pushes his way down, he finds Jesus, he beams right in on him, and he just falls down on him, right? Like there's this grown man who shows up and Jesus is answering questions and everybody's asking him stuff. This grown guy pushes his way in the crowd, falls down at his feet, and look at what he says. He begins to plead with him earnestly. And he says, "My little daughter is dying." I'd push my way in the crowd too. "Please come and put your hands on her, Jesus, so that she'll be healed and live." Now, I don't know anything about Jairus too much. Forgive me. I don't know anything about Jairus too much. But what I do know about him is all I need to know about him. Is that any brother, I'd be just like that. You'd be just like that. If my kids are in trouble, like I'd be pleading earnestly with Jesus, and I didn't care how big the crowd was or who was around. Like I would ask for help if I needed it, because clearly this Jesus cat can offer some help. And if I can just get a touch from him, right? This is beautiful about Jairus. If I could just get a touch from him, "Please come put your hands on her so that she'll be healed and live." Isn't that fantastic? Isn't that fantastic? And on another day, we can talk about that, like kind of the theology of touch that Jesus has. So Jesus does what only Jesus would do. He has compassion on him. And he says, and it says, Jesus went with him, and a large crowd followed and pressed in around him. So now we've set the stage for this large crowd. They've seen all this stuff, and it's all a day in the life of Jesus. And Jesus is going, and Jairus is leading them. He looks like he's leading the 7 dwarfs. He's marching them, going home, because he's on a mission to get this Jesus, this healer, this lover of his soul, of his kid, the hope for her, to get her to Jesus and to get Jesus to them. And so you can imagine, just dream with me a little bit. Like this is, I don't know what you do. Like some of you travel to sports teams, games, and you see 80, 100,000 people. I don't think the crowd's that big, but you can imagine maybe it's a few hundred that are swarmed around Jesus, and he's somewhere in the middle, and there's no donut hole. He's just there, and they're pressing in on him. It's what Mark's kind of alerting us, pressing around him. Like it's shoulder to shoulder, no social distancing, no mask, no nothing. And then he ties off this particular little verse, and this begins Mark chapter 5, verse 25. Now, in that gigantic crowd, there's a woman who had been suffering from a hemorrhage for 12 years. 12 years. 12 years she had this ailment that, and nobody really knows what it was. I mean, we can speculate some, but she's had this ailment that's made her life less than agreeable. In fact, it's probably made her life in her social context, it's probably made her life miserable. And she had endured a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Like she'd exhausted all her bank account trying to relieve the trouble that she has. Yet instead of getting better, she got worse. Imagine that. Like that's the day of I got a cure, but the cure is worse than the disease kind of a thing, right? Like she had done everything, and the emphasis in the original language is on worse, to point out to you and I like she had sought healing, and the things that she had hoped for had only made her problem worse. So when she had heard about Jesus, now I don't know how long she's been in the crowd. I like to think, and you don't have to dream with me, use your sanctified imagination a little bit if you want. I like to think that when Jesus healed that paralyzed fella on the mat, and he did the whole thing about what's easier to forgive their sins or tell him to get up and walk. Hey, why don't I do both? I hope she was around some of the scribes and Pharisees then, and she saw that. And she, as it says in Matthew's gospel, was in awe at the glory of God that he would invest such authority in a human being, in this Jesus. Then she didn't know what to do with him, but she figured, hey man, if he can do that for a brother that was on a mat, maybe he can help me a little bit. But she just didn't quite have the guts to lean in and ask him just yet. And so she follows along like many people do, heck, like most of us do. When we don't have the guts to engage with Jesus right away, we just kind of follow along in his wake. We trail along in the crowd, hoping to get a glimpse and to talk to him. But she heard about him some way, and I hope she heard how he answered from the table at Matthew's house. And I hope when she heard, it's not the healthy that I'm here for, but it's the sick. I hope she heard, all right, yeah. Yeah, I don't tell many people, but he might be that kind of guy. And so I hope she pressed in and she heard a little bit more about him while he's mixing it up with his cousin's followers and trying to explain fasting. And he's trying to say, look, man, your traditions amount to squat right now. Like your traditions, which is again in Matthew chapter 9, it's in Mark chapter 6, I believe as well. He's trying to say, look, the traditions, you need to stay focused on me and don't stay focused on what you know. And I hope she heard that and she's going, all right, yeah. Yeah, like maybe this guy, he's saying all the right things. And there's something kind of about him. So when she's in the crowd, I hope as Jairus pushed in there and he poured his heart out in front of everybody and like was completely vulnerable, transparent, authentic. I mean, he's slobbering on himself. He's got snot going. He can't even talk right because he is like, get to my baby, right? I hope she saw him. I hope she saw him. And she said, yeah, he's the one. So when Mark writes that when she heard about Jesus, I don't think it was a one and done kind of hearing. I think she's been watching all afternoon or after evening or whatever the case was. But like most of us, as I said a minute ago, like most of us, she came up behind him in the crowd and she touched his cloak. And she kept saying, there's a great irony in that saying, in the original language, or at least I think there is. But she kept saying, if only I could touch his clothes, I'll be healed. And it's the whole point I want to make today, right? This summertime, we'll kind of trim it down and make it short and sweet if we can do that, if I can do that. And she came up behind him. And when I saw that the last few weeks, I began to ask, like, how come if you got a problem for 12 years, how come she never, because that's the irony here, she doesn't say a word. She's right there. She's that close to Jesus. She's seen all that stuff and she never pushes through. She never does what Jairus does. She never pleads her case with Jesus. Like, how come if you had this ailment for 12 years, you spent all your money, nobody's been able to help you? In fact, it probably seemed hopeless in some regard. Like, why do you not say anything to Jesus? If you're so close that you could touch his clothes and you think to yourself, you know what, maybe if I could just touch the hem of his garment, some translations will read, if you're familiar with it. If I could just touch the tassel on the shawl that he's got around, if I could just touch that, that'll be enough for me. I don't need to. Like if you're that close, man, why aren't you pushing in and like making a hole? I don't know what the rest of you guys and gals are here for, but I know what I'm here for, and that's him right there. Like, why wouldn't you say something? And it began to put this whole idea in my mind of like, why when you're that close, you know you need help, why would you be there and never ask for it? And it just broke my heart. And I wondered if some of the reasons that she didn't ask for it are some of the reasons that you and I wouldn't ask for help, right? Because I wonder if she was really just kind of afraid to ask him. Like, she's seen him do all this stuff, and in her mind, and it's kind of this crazy dilemma with fear that when we have a great need, there's also this great fear that wells up in us. And so I wonder if she looked at Jesus and she thought, man, he's way too important to mess with me. Even though everything he said like connected with her soul and made her just know that he loved her and loved every person that would come into his sphere of contact. I wonder if sometimes when she was in the presence of the holy, like all of us, it's just overwhelming, it's intimidating. And I wonder if she was just too afraid to ask him. I don't know. I also wondered, given the whole hemorrhage aspect of it, I wonder if she was just ashamed to ask. You remember, we're pressed in like we're shoulder to shoulder. It is like a concert. There are people everywhere. And who of you, what am I going to say? Hey, sir, excuse me, I've got this issue where I've been bleeding for 12 years and I don't, if you could help me out, I'd really appreciate that a lot. Like, who's going to say that out loud in front of a great crowd, right? And so maybe she's just ashamed to say what the problem is that she needs help with. I can dig that. I've got plenty of problems in my life. I'm probably the only one. I've got plenty of problems in my life that I'm just sort of sometimes ashamed to ask for help about. But I wonder too, if maybe she was just too proud to ask, right? And she's, we'll see in a couple of weeks how this works out, but maybe she's like some of us, man. Maybe she just lives in this perpetual state of denial. Maybe that's why she wouldn't necessarily, she had to sneak up from behind him and kind of steal a touch rather than ask for help. She's just in denial, right? She's just like all of us. We just treat a problem like it doesn't exist, and surely it'll just go away. Or maybe you remember from the text earlier, she had seen many physicians. She'd spent all her money and they hadn't made her better. They had in fact made her worse. So maybe it was this one why she didn't ask Jesus, even though everything he said connected with her soul and let her know that he loved her and he loved everybody and that he was capable and had the capacity to do. And his intention was to offer healing. But maybe all her prior bad experiences kept her from asking Jesus for help. I got some of those too. I bet you do too, right? Like when you've asked for help from somebody and they just dismissed it. They treat it like it wasn't that big a deal to them, or it really wasn't that big a deal at all. And they just blow you off. And then sometimes maybe when you work up the guts to go back to them a second time or a third, and they just continue to be dismissive and blow you off. It doesn't take, what's the old phrase? You kick a dog long enough and he won't come back to you, or it's something like that, right? If you blow me off long enough, if you give me a bad experience, like I'm not going to ask for help more than that. And maybe that was her experience. Maybe that's why she doesn't ask for help. Heck, maybe that's why you don't ask for help, even though you might know that you need it. Or maybe, last of all, is maybe she didn't want to burden somebody else by asking. Like maybe she didn't want to burden Jesus with my problem, I think this one at least is playing somewhere in her life. I think going on in her mind would go on with all of us. I'm way too insignificant to bog Jesus down with my troubles. Like I know I need help, but like Annie, he's got big stuff to do. Like he just made a guy get up and walk. He just set the religious ilk straight. He just he just told us that there's greater things to come. And he's better than what I can ever hope for. And so maybe she just didn't want to burden him, or maybe she didn't want to burden him because she still thought she was self-sufficient. Perhaps that one's yours too, and I struggle with that one a lot. I delude myself, even though I've been present for every stupid thing I've ever done. I somehow think the same thinking that got me into trouble is the same thinking that'll get me out of trouble. And so maybe I didn't, maybe she didn't, maybe you didn't want to ask for help because you just don't want to burden somebody else with asking it, right? I don't know what the case is, but what I do know is this, is that every single one of those things and everything that's kind of underlying why she wouldn't ask Jesus when she's that close for help, when she knows that she needs it, all of it can be tracked back to a single word. I believe it was Janet Jackson that made that one famous. Control. Every bit of why she wouldn't ask for help when she knew that she needed it can be tracked back to control. Every bit of every time in my life, I bet it's true in your life, and I know it's true in our collective life as a church. Every time when we knew we needed help but we wouldn't ask for it, you can always track it back to some semblance of control. And if you don't think you got control issues, just plan your day. This happens to me all the time. Plan your day out and see how you feel when two things in a row don't go right. See how your anxiety level works. See what happens to your mood. See what happens to your ability to focus. And it's all tracked back. She knew she needed help, and she wouldn't ask for it. And it all stems from control. And Henry Cloud addresses this idea of control as it relates to asking for help here. And here's what he says, and I've kind of restyled it a little bit in my own language, but it's his idea. He says that when we ask for help, we are in control of the help we're getting. You know, think about that for a minute. If asking for help when we know we have a need is an issue of control on our part that we don't like, think about it. We're completely in control when we ask for help, because we can ask for the help that we need. And that's fantastic. That should embolden us to pursue help in all shape, form, and fashion. But the flip side is this, is that when we don't ask for help, we're also in control of the help we're missing out on, right? And it's the both sides of the coin idea in this idea that we have in the United States of everybody's got rights. Well, you also got responsibilities to be a person, in personhood, and that's granted by God. You got rights and you got responsibilities, and this one's the right to ask for help. This one's the responsibility of owning when you didn't ask for help. And with her is the same way. Like, she right there, the lover of her soul, the lover of my soul, the lover of your soul stands in her midst, and she wouldn't ask for help because it was an issue of control, and she could have missed it. You could miss it. I could miss it. We could miss out on getting the help we need simply because we won't ask, which is really the point of our message today. Everyone, I do, you do, we do. Everyone needs help, but not everyone will ask for it. Everyone needs help, but not everyone will ask for help. And for some of the reasons maybe we covered a few minutes ago, maybe those are some of your reasons. They're part of mine. But this is what I know. And we're going to leave it kind of tense today, and we'll pick it up next week to answer some of the questions I hope this generates with you. This is what I know, is that everyone needs help, but not everyone will ask for help. And if I don't get the help that I need, if I don't ask for help, then I'm in control of the help that I'm missing out on. Or as James chapter 4, as he said it, you do not have, if you could put in brackets, help, because you do not ask God. I do not have help that I need, that I want, maybe that you need, maybe that you want. We do not have because we do not ask of the one who can make all things right, who can grant healing and wholeness and help to the helpless, to the hopeless, to the afflicted, to the broken, to the least, to the last, to the lost, to those who would humble themselves long enough so that they would not be without, and they would ask God for help. So next week we'll pick up kind of in the same verses from Mark chapter 5, and we're going to explore a little bit more about why perhaps she wouldn't ask and what is necessary for you and I if we're going to receive healing, if we're going to receive help, the key thing that is necessary for us to receive that help. I hope you'll join us next week. Have a great week.